So what's happened with the priming now is there were 2 coats of high build polyester primer put on, Feather Fill or Eastwood Contours. There's a couple on the market. That gets sanded back with 220, and then you're going to go around the entire body and search for any little pinholes. They appear where the paint doesn't adhere to it because there's little holes in the gel coat or fiberglass. Fill those with some spot putty, 2-part, get the good kind if you use it, and then sand out the pinholes. And then what I did here is I sprayed the entire body again with 2 coats of 2K primer. It's a 2-part urethane primer, and then this goes on really smooth, and you can see if I wet it down, you know how the water flows off it nicely and the surface looks almost perfect. But again, I've covered it with the dry coat, the guide coat, and now this is going to get wet sanded back and with 400, and that'll be the final sand before actually painting the car. So you got to be careful with this one. You want it to be really nice. You can see when you sand it, it's a lot easier sanding than the high build, the polyester primers, and a lot easier than the gel coat, even though you're using a lesser, you know, a higher grade sandpaper. And when I sand it off, though, you can still see, you know, in the guide coat, it's got more sanding to go, but it goes pretty quickly. You want to be careful of all the edges, because if you bear down on them too hard, you'll bring it back down to the primer underneath it, or even the gel coat if you go too hard. Basically, you want to put enough pressure on it and let the sandpaper do the work. And you can see, you know, the water, you keep the surface damp, but not so much that the sandpaper itself is hydroplaning. But you can see the water go cloudy. And it's also nice to work with too, wet sanding, because you don't have to worry about wearing a mask because there's no dust. So gradually it gets to the point where you don't see any of the dry guide coat behind. And when you get to that point where it's all gone on the entire body, you're ready to spray it. After you do this too, you know, you can take one more step and take the Scotch-Brite pads, the ultra fine, and run that over. And they have special, it's like a soap material that's made as a pre-wash prep for painting. But once you get to this point, the body's perfect. And almost even the gray primer looks like, when it's wet like that, looks like it's good enough just to run the car in that. You could put a clear coat over this stuff if you really love the color, but it doesn't have the UV protection or anything that a paint would have, so not a great idea. So I'm just going to go ahead. It'll take about 2 hours to wet sand this entire, the center part, the spider, because there's a lot of intricate areas, the cup holders, they call them, in here, all these points here, and transitions. I got to be careful in all the corners. Meanwhile, the excavator's in the backyard doing some work. Oh, she's done, so now she's gonna take her nap.